and Q&A. We're really excited to be starting this series where we get to know better some of our favorite Happs creators and folks who've been doing some really interesting work on the platform. So this is our very first episode, and I'm really pleased to introduce this week's creator. And we have with us Olga Lautman. Olga, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
So Olga is an investigative researcher who's done an incredible amount of work really on a number of important geopolitical fronts. Her specialty is Russia. Olga, introduce yourself to those who may not be familiar with you and your background.
So basically, I have spent all my years my main focus areas of focus are Russia, the Kremlin, Ukraine, and basically all of Eastern Europe, and the threat the Kremlin poses to the West, to democracy, and the hybrid warfare they're conducting, operations during elections, etc., etc. So that's basically what I spend my time doing.
And so you dig deep into these issues. You have, hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter who rely upon you and your colleagues for really, important information, cutting, breaking news in a lot of ways. But would you say you're a journalist?
No, see, I don't find myself a journalist because mainly like I collect information more and I kind of try to get it to journalists and to get it on Twitter in some cases and to whoever, at that moment can find this information useful. And I, work in the region. I'm from the region. I work in the region. So I have a lot of sources on the ground who could give me information that kind of, uh, is useful, especially that it's timely information. So I basically then will hand it over and contact journalists or try to get this information out, especially when it relates to United States.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. So you collaborate a lot with journalists, with writers, with academics then, is that correct?
Yes, and I was a main researcher for a journalist, Craig Unger. Both of his, he's a New York Times bestseller. Both of his books, House of Trump, House of Putin, and American Compromise, which you guys must read because it kind of gives you the foundation of how Russia, why Trump and Russia and the attack on U.S. during 2016 elections and why they chose Trump and the 4 decades long dealings that he's had, going back to Soviet days with Soviet officials and, organized crime members from Soviet Union and intelligence officials. So, I mean, it's definitely a must read. And I was a researcher for both of those books, and being that I can research in Ukrainian and Russian and English, I mean, it makes my job a lot easier, especially that the information is coming from the region.
Of course. So I just want to, first of all, greet those who are tuning in. Thanks for joining us. We have
Hi, how are you?
we have Mark Goldman, our CEO here at Happs. Thanks so much for
Oh,
tuning in, Mark.
hi. Hi, Mark.
Great to see you today. And we do have a question already. Let's hold on those from the audience. We will have some time later towards the end of the stream to get into some of those. So keep those handy. We will have a chance to ask those to Olga directly. I just want to make sure we cover some of the bases. And first of all, I guess this new podcast that you've been doing, which has just exploded out of the gates here, I will put on screen this visual here for the podcast. It is called the Kremlin File. And Olga, tell us about how this got started and how you and your co-host Monique got launched.
So basically, I've been working behind the scenes the past, 5 years, again, relating to the region. And part of my motivators was that the media, how the American media covered this attack on U.S., whether a cyber attack or an election interference or disinformation campaigns. The way they covered it frustrated me because they didn't tell a full picture, of what is happening. And, and they kind of almost, made it a Dem versus Republican thing. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Like what's happening in the United States, I mean, we're the 37th country to have absolutely the same exact tactics. You know, being half Ukrainian, we had the same exact attacks, and we were a testing ground by the Kremlin for all the attacks that we see around the globe. So Monique and I had met. She actually had asked me for an interview on Russia on her podcast, and then we had met, and she shared the same frustrations. She shared, the same fears, because I mean, it's besides the fact of the threat that Russia poses, it's also who they're, collaborating with. And they have been for the past decade supporting all the far right groups in Europe and United States. And Monique, is in Italy. And she saw, for herself, like this fascism rising. And she's like, what is going on? And she panicked. And then we decided, let's do a podcast to tell the whole story of who Putin is, how he came to power, what the KGB was, how the KGB morphed into FSB. And, and then to kind of like show how the Kremlin used in the 2000s their neighbors as a testing ground for these hybrid warfare tactics. And then by like, after Russia invaded Ukraine, how they started focusing on the West. And I mean, like people here made such a big deal about like, oh, Hillary's DNC emails got hacked, and and it was kind of like minimized. Meanwhile, before every single election, whether it be in France with Macron's emails being hacked, or in Germany with Merkel and her party's emails being hacked. Right now, there's an election coming, and the Green Party has been under a hack attack by the Russians since, March. So basically, we wanted to tell the bigger story of every single country that the Kremlin is interfering in, operating in, whether it be cyber, mercenaries, and all their tactics. So people recognize that when they're scrolling through Facebook and reading disinformation, chances are it is being generated out of Russia in order to divide our country and to cause as much chaos as possible.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the first episode that I listened to is just phenomenal, really setting the stage. It really goes over a lot of history that's not commonly understood or really covered in mainstream news, and or at least not for many years, but an important chapter to remember. Tell us, how many episodes there are, where can we find this podcast, and how can people support it?
So we are on all platforms where people listen to their podcast. And at launch week, we actually got into the number 8 slot on Apple News category, which was amazing. I mean, the amount of support. Wow. It was like we were all so happy. So basically, any place you listen to your podcast, there will be, I mean, Monique and I laughed because we started with, we were like, oh, we're going to do 8 episodes. Well, 8 episodes, thanks to the Kremlin and their operations, turned to like now it'll be closer to 30 episodes.
Oh my God. Wow.
And we're basically going to, cover every single country where Russia is operating, go over the history, how they got there, every tactic they use. And, and we definitely have quite a few episodes on all the conspiracy theories we see, flourishing, even to the point that it's led to actual, attacks and death on U.S. soil. And we're going to cover it all just to show, the capabilities of Russia and what they have been doing. I mean, basically since post-World War II, and the importance of our alliance, our alliance is maintaining them, because I mean, Russia's main goal is to sever all alliances. So kind of the whole West kind of fragments, and then of course becomes weaker.
Wow. So massive in scope, around 30 episodes estimated. Highly recommended personally if you're interested in foreign policy, intelligence, in general. It's just phenomenally well done. And I'm really thrilled that you all are also on Happs, using our platform to engage with your audience. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that in particular, why Happs? What do you like about it? And let's put up a screenshot here of your recent episode here on Happs. There we go. There's your profile.
Yep. So, when Monique and I, we decided to do the podcast. We also decided the podcast, a new episode will be released every Thursday. But then we decided that we want to actually, interact with people who might have questions on the previous episode. So, being that I, tried Happs like the beginning of the year, I was like, this is the perfect platform because first we have the reach. Second of all, we can, it's very interactive and we can take questions and answer questions on, the previous episode or basically anything Russia related. So that's why we chose Happs because, the platform is great. We can have guest speakers on, and it has an incredible reach across many platforms. So.
That's great. Yeah, well said. It's been really fun to connect with your colleagues as well. Tell us about Scott Lucas as well and his role. It's been fun to have the trio. The dynamic on screen is lots of energy, some laughs even too. You guys have a great sense of humor, despite covering these really heavy
Yeah.
topics. I will say it is fun.
Yeah, no, you have to because if not, you end up in the loony bin. Well, Scott, we know. He's excellent. Like understands foreign policy, and he's like one of those jack of all trades. Where, like, you ask him about Syria, he'll know is fully, well versed in it. You ask him about Russia, about Ukraine, about whatever is happening in the world, and he's just. We kind of started the three of us, and it's just been so much fun having him on because he's just, like he has a great sense of humor. He's very knowledgeable about the topic and can provide, the information as it's happening. So we decided to, have him on, and he's amazing. Like, we love him. Three Musketeers.
That's great. Certainly seems like it. Would love to invite folks to start posing any questions you have for Olga about the podcast, about any issues that she covers in her area of expertise, and we can start to get to
And
those.
also, before anything, I want to thank our production company. They are amazing. What they have done with this podcast and the creation that they've made like from each episode is just amazing. Bunker Crew, and they're great. And Midas Touch for helping distribute and promote and making sure that this gets to regular Americans who maybe are not well versed in Russia and don't follow foreign policy, but actually can get to hear what is happening in kind of a more digestible form. So I wanted to give the thanks to them and to you
Of
for
course.
helping with Happs.
No, our pleasure. We're really glad to
Yeah,
have you on
thank
the
you so much.
platform. And
For helping set up. The first time I came back a few weeks ago, I was like, how do I upload anything?
well, you are mastering the studio. So, just a backstory: Olga has been on Happs from the early days, and Olga's had a great, sense of humor as we've moved really at light speed, and our platform has just
Yes.
advanced, yeah, over the series of months dramatically. So, Olga is now driving, so to speak, doing all of the behind the scenes stuff in the studio and really producing your own show, which is great.
Yes, yes. Yeah, no, and again, thank you. And now I am slowly becoming an expert on how to, put everything together.
That's awesome. So let's see if we have any questions here. Feel free. Just want to say welcome, Al Sanchez. Happy, Debeth, Veda, thank you so much for tuning in. We have Rev with us as well. Debeth,
Hi,
grateful for
everyone.
y'all
Hi,
dropping
thank you.
in. Yeah, let us know if you have any questions for Olga about either the Kremlin File podcast or about her expertise. The podcast is available right now anywhere that you can view them, and also do subscribe to Olga here on Happs. You're able to get those notifications when she goes live with her colleagues who are on the podcast, and they do some really
And,
fun extra
subs-
content.
and subscribe to the podcast once you find it on your favorite platform. Subscribe, listen, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you, and make it better. Suggestions we love, and also, and leave us 5 stars if you like the
There you go.
content.
Yeah, it deserves them, certainly. So while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I'm wondering, tell us, if you can, what's been the most interesting part about recording and producing that podcast series? Is the first podcast that you all have done together?
Yes, this is our first podcast, and I mean, Mo and I just get along so well, and it's just, like we literally, like, we wake up with a cup of coffee, we have laughs, we put this together, and we also are, very focused on making it digestible, because, like, a lot of people in the foreign policy world, like, they understand what's happening, and the whole point is for regular people to understand, what is happening, what's happening with Putin's regime, like, why there aren't any fair elections. Like, someone had told Mo, like, oh, I don't understand, they don't like Putin, they could just vote him out in the next election, like, people need to have these myths, broken. Like, there are no elections in Russia. No, they're not going to, vote Putin out. So basically, I mean, we just want to give the basics to everyone and make it understandable. And we have the most amazing experts. For the first episode, we had Masha Gessen, who, lived through Putin's, like, the change in Russia during Putin. For episode 2, we had Yuri Felshtinsky, who is a Soviet and Russian historian who, co-wrote a book with Litvinenko, who was poisoned by Putin in London with polonium. So, I mean, he was there, he was working with Litvinenko. They were trying to expose, the apartment building bombings in 99, which led to Putin's rise in power. And we just have amazing guest experts, like, across every, topic, whether it's cyber, whether it's mercenaries, whether it's Africa or Venezuela or United States or Germany. And that's it. So, I mean, we're very happy to do it. I mean, Monique and I, just, like, we're like a team in heaven. She's like my soul sister in Italy.
That's amazing. And remind viewers out there when your regular Happs broadcast is, when you're streaming here, and when the podcast episodes are released every week.
So on Happs, we will be streaming every Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our episodes get released every Thursday, 12 a.m. PS time, Pacific Standard Time. There you go. And 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And they're available, if you subscribe, you'll wake up to them in your library.
Got it. There you go. So now everyone knows out there. And I invite some questions from the audience if you have them for Olga about the podcast, about some of her research and expertise areas. Feel free. Don't be shy. I think, as Olga explained, she's really focused on making this really important and often misunderstood topics really accessible. And so there's no stupid questions. Don't be shy. I feel like I'm a teacher in a classroom again.
I
But
know, right? Don't be shy. No, 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 no. I mean, the whole
raise your
point, and
hand
this
in the
is
back.
another reason why we're doing Happs, because, someone listens to an episode and wants to know a little bit more about something, like, we want people to feel free to come to us, ask, like, like, oh, can you get more in detail, or could this possibly be something that happened that's related to your last episode, or so I mean, that's also one of the reasons we want to answer as many questions. We want to give as much information we can to people, because the more you know, the better.
Awesome. We have so I know we weren't planning to really delve too much into
Oh, someone
Afghanistan. We're
asked,
already getting
will Russia
questions.
recognize the Taliban when they form a government? The Taliban is protecting their embassy. The Russian ambassador to Taliban yesterday morning said that, I mean, they're having a meeting tomorrow with the Taliban, and most likely they will recognize them. They've been working with the Taliban for, I mean, years, and funding the Taliban, supplying weapons to them. And today, the Russian ambassador to Afghanistan, called the Taliban very adequate men who are, he doesn't see them as madmen or terrorists. So yes,
Wow.
and answer to your question, they will be recognizing them, as well as China and Pakistan.
Right. Question from Mark on this topic as well. Our CEO here at Happs. So great to have him in the comments today. So we'd
Hi,
love to
Mark.
hear your thoughts on what's unfolding now and how it was handled from an intelligence perspective. I guess to put a question there, is this really a proxy victory for Russia vis-a-vis the U.S. in terms of foreign policy?
In terms of foreign policy, it's definitely a victory for Russia and China. I mean, there's no way to spin it. We can all argue whether we should have been in Afghanistan, shouldn't be, what happened over the past 20 years. At this point, I think the exit is what, we could have exited a little bit more organized and avoid seeing all the images we're seeing. And at the same time, I fear that Al Qaeda is going to, go back to Afghanistan and be, have very free to operate. And now we're not really going to have the intelligence to be able to obtain, any kind of information if they're planning an attack on U.S. soil or U.S. interest. And I also worry about Russia's, um, allegiance with Taliban, because I mean, we all last year quickly went over the story of how Russia was paying bounties to Taliban to on American soldiers, to kill American soldiers, and we really never got to even that intelligence, or like we had some people in the intelligence community with certainty say this. Other people said, well, maybe we need to look more into it. But the fact is, it's been happening. Russia has been working with the Taliban for a long time. And, and we still haven't gotten even to the point of that. And I feel that now it's like we have to have even more eyes on the region, especially with that, and with Pakistan, and with China. I mean, China is also, privately backing this. And there, as a matter of fact, yesterday morning, both Russia said they were going to most likely, acknowledge the government, the Taliban, as a government. And China was right there with them. So, I mean, and both of them are sending their people to meet with the Taliban, Russia, tomorrow. And also, don't forget, Taliban was just in Moscow last month. I mean, they were strolling through the Radisson in Moscow. They were there for a few days in talks with the foreign minister and others in the Russian government. So I am very worried as far as what the future holds. But right now, we have to focus on getting Americans and as many Afghans who helped us and helped all our coalition forces out of there, and then we can go back to figuring out how to, like, what went wrong, what we could have done better, and what can we do going forward. So right now we just need to get everybody out.
Right. Clearly the priority there. Yeah. Have the events of the last few days surprised you, Olga, at all? Or was it a shock? In most of the media, it seems like this was in some ways a shock, in some ways a foregone conclusion once U.S. Troops were planned and announced to withdraw. But what's your take?
I mean, I'm not an expert on Afghanistan by any means. I focus on it because of, what Russia is doing and their mercenaries were operating there. But I did not see it as a shock at all. I mean, the fact, maybe the biggest shock was that it took a few days versus, 10 days. But I mean, you have clearly there was a behind the scenes deal made where, the regional governors said, lay down your arms and, welcome Taliban in. I mean, this is something we're going to have to really investigate. But it's interesting because I read a DNI report in April and it basically spelled out exactly what we're seeing as we're seeing it. It didn't give a time frame, but it said that very quickly we will see the situation, devolve into this, and with Taliban taking full control over Afghanistan. So the intelligence community has been predicting this for years, all the reports in the government have been laying out basically what happened for years. So it's not a shock. It is very hard for people, and I want to take this time to thank, everyone who served there, because I mean, they really put a lot into it, and for people to see this unraveling and just the scenes that are coming out, it's heartbreaking for them, and it's heartbreaking just, for us as humans, I mean, we have to strive to do better.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, clearly, from a human rights perspective, this is very alarming in the near, medium, and long term. So it's
Yeah.
certainly, an important chapter in.
But I see the blame game already, and I'm like, let's get people out first. You can start your blame game like, wait, first get everyone to safety, and then, you can go and have hearings and pour over data and see what, happened. Right now, like people really need to back up, because I see like this agency is blaming this agency, this president is blaming that president. I mean, and then you have the Republican Party, who completely is nuts. They're rewriting history, deleting pages of what Trump did. Trump is the one who, I've been following Trump and Taliban and Putin, I mean, since 2018, when it was announced. I've been reading it in their press, tweeting about it, documenting everything. So for the Republican Party to suddenly rewrite everything is absurd. And then I just literally, before I came on with you, saw a tweet by that wacko Lauren Boebert, who says that Taliban is much better at, building back. Are we kidding? Like, is the Republican Party now at a point that they're going to be protecting and defending terrorists that Americans lost their lives fighting? I mean, it's incredible, because I mean, if we want America to go forward and to keep our democracy, like, people really need to drop the partisan, politics, and look at things from an American point of view and from a national security point of view. We can't have half of the party, supporting terrorists and cheerleading for the Taliban, and rewriting their own history, and they're like mixed in with the talking points. It's absurd. But right now our main concern is to get everyone out, and then we can get back together.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the Biden administration is blaming the Afghan president and military. I mean, it definitely, it is them. It's a combination of many things that failed. It's not America. It's not, it's a combination of things, that went wrong. Like, people, I guess, anticipated the Afghan president not running out of the country and the military fighting more. I mean, on the other hand, if U.S. military is present in many countries, for decades, and in order to maintain peace, and even some of our strongest allies, like, faced with a full-blown war, wouldn't be able to handle without our logistics and air cover and and whatnot. So I mean, there's no right solution there, and this definitely would warrant like a 5-hour discussion.
Certainly, yeah, discussion
Yeah.
for another day to get into that level of detail. Just want to invite anyone with final questions here in the audience to ask them before we have to wrap up. Olga, I have one for you. Since your expertise is national security, what are some of the implications in terms of the U.S.'s national security with just the recent developments that have happened and how quickly the Taliban have been able to reestablish power and take over the government there? What really does this represent in large
Again,
strokes?
I worry. I mean, we have a leverage. We can, put pressure on Pakistan because they helped behind the scenes. We can put pressure on Russia, but I worry for our safety. I mean, no one wants to see another terrorist attack. No one wants to see another terrorist organization, gaining strength. I mean, for past few decades, this is what we've been trying to minimize in the Middle East is the ISIS and Al Qaeda from operating on U.S. soil or against U.S. interests overseas. And I worry that right now, that they'll be able to, Al Qaeda at least, will be able to freely operate in Afghanistan. And it will be hard for us, besides putting more pressure on Pakistan. But I mean, we already saw how how that works. But there are still ways to do it, So that's my worry. I mean, my worry is just as far as the future of the attacks. My worry also is after this, if we do suffer another attack, we might, not find people to trust us to come work with us because you have Afghans right now who are trapped there, translators, people who risk their lives to work with us. I know one who worked in the U.S. Embassy was executed over the weekend. And, last year, the Kurds abandoned Trump abandoned the Kurds, who again worked with us, to fight against ISIS. So that is my concern. We that not only we may suffer another terrorist attack, but then we're not going to find people willing to help us because, if we say we'll keep you safe, we won't be able to, go through with it, especially with these two instances. And we saw this with Trump last year with the Kurds. I mean, it was inexcusable what happened then.
Boy, yeah, certainly big concerns there on many fronts. I think, we're going to call it here. We're over 30 minutes. I just want to thank you so much for your time. And,
Thank
maybe,
you.
yeah, maybe others who have questions can tune in to the podcast and also tune in to your regular Happs stream, which will be tomorrow, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Tomorrow noon, we're on Haps, and then you can find me on Twitter at Olga NYC 1211, and then Monique on Twitter at Monique Kamara. That's her account.
There we go. So thank you so much again for your time today, Olga. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. I
Thank
really,
you guys,
yeah,
and listen to the podcast because you'll definitely learn a lot. Like it covers everything.
absolutely. Yes. Go check it out on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you,
Or KremlinFile.com. You'll see all the latest.
KremlinFile.com. There you go. It is the Kremlin File. And I guess we'll see you back here tomorrow on Happs with your colleagues
Yes.
for those who are anticipating that next stream. So thanks again for tuning in, everyone in the comments. And yeah, feel free to reach out to Olga on Twitter or here on Happs tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you. Thank
All
you,
right.
Peter. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
My pleasure. Have a great day. Thanks, Olga.
Thank you.